Good evening from New York. This is Tuesday, November 30th, 707 days until the 2012 presidential election. And now that Republican leaders Boehner and McConnell have met with the president at the White House, the president is talking about finding sensible common ground. But in our fifth story, with sensible out the window and common an illusion created by Democrats on the verge of capitulation, that just leaves ground, which Republicans have done a pretty good job of running the Democrats into. This morning's so-called summit between GOP and Democratic leaders was perhaps notable for the restrained tenor of the statements that followed it. So let's get the obvious out of the way.
There's a reason why we have Democrats and Republicans.
We have two parties for a reason.
But having said that, the more time that we do spend together, we can find a common ground.
Having said that, we agreed that there must be some sensible common ground.
Both sides agreed to press forward on negotiations over the Bush tax cuts through their respective designees. From the White House, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner and Budget Director Jack Lew. From congressional Republicans, Senator John Kyle and Representative Dave Camp of Michigan. From congressional Democrats, Senator Max Baucus and Representative Chris Van Hollen. But beneath the repeated bromides about the two parties working together, there were key distinctions in how each side characterized the meeting. The president pointed out that Republicans still want a permanent extension of tax cuts that includes the wealthiest Americans.
I continue to believe that it would be unwise and unfair, particularly at a time when we're contemplating deep budget cuts that require broad sacrifice. Having said that, we agreed that there must be some sensible common ground.
And the president said that he wanted the parties to, quote, break through this log jam. But from House Speaker-elect John Boehner and Senate Minority Leader McConnell, this.
And so we're looking forward to the conversation with the White House over extending all of the current rates, and I remain optimistic.
We did have an opportunity to reiterate that it is the view of 100% of Senate Republicans and a number of Senate Democrats as well that the tax rates should not be bifurcated. In other words, that we ought to treat all taxpayers the same.
Especially the rich ones. And if it sounds like the Republicans do not see the tax cut negotiations as a logjam, but something rather closer to a fait accompli, there were other subtle but alarming differences. From the president, this.
I thought that people came to it with a spirit of trying to work together, and I think it's a good start as we move forward. I think that there was a sincere effort on the part of everybody involved to actually commit to work together to try to deal with these problems. And
from incoming House Majority Leader Eric Cantor and Mr. Boehner, this.
I was encouraged by the president's remarks regarding his perhaps not having reached out enough to us in the last session, and that this meeting was the beginning of a series in which he hoped that we could work together in a different fashion.
The president did make an important point that Eric mentioned, that he hadn't spent as much time with us reaching out and talking to us, and committed to do so.
As for the pesky matter of unemployment benefits, which will begin to expire for 2.5 million Americans tomorrow.
And we discussed unemployment insurance, which expires today. I've asked that Congress act to extend this emergency relief without delay to folks who are facing tough times by no fault of their own.
And one final note about those Bush tax cuts. There is word today that House Democrats still plan to vote on extending the Bush tax cuts just for the middle class. Those would be the Obama cuts. Congressman Van Hollen, previously mentioned as part of the tax negotiation working group, has said the House vote may come as early as Thursday of this week. Let's turn now to Congressman Javier Becerra of California's 31st District, also serving on the House Budget and Ways and Means Committees. Congressman, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
The House will, at least according to Mr. Van Hollen, finally hold that vote. An extension of tax cuts only for the middle class, but supposedly this is going to take place under suspension, requiring 2/3 support. Is that the case to your knowledge, and can it pass under those conditions?
Well, we're hoping that the Republicans would join us and not try to hold up or hold as hostage the tax cuts for the middle class, but we'll see. We're hoping to move this through, and if we can get their support, we can get this over to the Senate and hopefully get it done quickly.
But all the Republicans ever do, Congressman, is hold Democrats in hostage, even when they're in vast majorities. Why is there any reason for somebody watching this who is in this extraordinary situation of prolonged unemployment to think they have a snowball's chance in hell before Christmas?
In the House, all we can do is try. We've sent over some good bills to the Senate, and they die in the Senate. But we're going to make every effort to try to make sure that we not only give tax cuts to the middle class, but we're actually including, and this I think is a great compromise and good common ground, we're going to include the wealthiest Americans, millionaires and billionaires, in that $250,000 in income that can be counted towards those tax cuts. So every single American, from the poorest to the wealthiest, will have an opportunity to participate in these tax cuts.
Given that your colleague, Congressman John Larson, said, and I'll read the quote, an extension of all the tax cuts in the House is pretty much of a non-starter. If the Senate passed tax cuts for $1 million and down, or $2 million and down, or for everybody, what happens in the negotiations between the House and the Senate in committee?
Well, I hope not only do we find common ground, but I hope the President will hold his ground and continue to advocate for what's fair. And that is to try to make sure that everyone up to their first $250,000 of income can benefit from these tax cuts. But beyond that, unless we want to continue borrowing money from China to pay for these tax cuts for the very, very wealthy, who, by the way, over the last decade were the ones that benefited the most from the Bush tax cuts, then we have to figure out a different way. And so I really think that for 10 years, when the wealthy were getting $100,000 per year in these tax cuts, while the average American family was getting about $500 total, that it's time for folks who partied for a decade to help clean up the mess. And so it's fair enough to say $250,000 of your income, Warren Buffett or any other millionaire, you're going to get a tax write-off up to the first $250,000 of your income, just like the rest of America will, up to, if they're lucky, get to $250,000. But beyond that, I think common ground can be reached by holding our ground and saying $250 and no more.
You mentioned the President holding his ground. It seems to me that he's nearly broken his arm reaching out to the Republicans over the last 2 years. In that context, what exactly is happening at the White House if Boehner and Cantor and McConnell could walk out of there today and say, we're happy the President has now admitted that he didn't reach out more to us, and now he's promised he's going to reach out more to us?
I suspect the President's words were not that he admitted that he hadn't reached out. I suspect, in fact, if he had to come out on camera and say, he'd say he not only reached out on many occasions, but he reached out only directly to House Republicans on more than one occasion, and only Senate Republicans on another occasion where Democrats weren't even included. So this President has reached out far more than I ever recall George Bush reaching out to the other party. Again, it's part of the political tactic that's played on the Hill. I hope that we finally come together, stop holding tax cuts for the middle class hostage, and get this done before Christmas comes.
Congressman Javier Becerra of California, great thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you.